Hello, folks. Happy New Year. This is Mike Jenkins back with episode 2 of my review show. And this time around, we have 3 stories. And the 3 stories this week, story number 1, we're going to be talking about Wonder Woman 2, the sequel to the very successful Wonder Woman. It's at this point DC's most successful film in its DC cinematic universe. I hate the term extended universe. That makes absolutely no sense to me. So I am sticking with the DC cinematic universe. It makes sense. It's straight to the point. So DCCU. Uh, Wonder Woman is the most successful film in that series so far, and she's getting a sequel, and we'll be talking about that. Kind of piggybacking off of that, we'll also be talking a little bit about what's going on with the uh, intellectual property at DC Films, who's running the DC cinematic universe right now. So that's going to piggyback off of the Wonder Woman sequel story. The second story we have will be dealing with Star Wars Episode 9, what my expectations of it are, and I'll extend to you and ask you what your expectations of it are. And there's just going to be some interesting little tidbits to talk about there. Story number 3 will deal with Netflix and some sequel seasons and movies that are coming out over there. So we'll get into details about that once we get to that story. So we will go ahead and jump into story number 1, which is Wonder Woman 2. That's set to debut in 2019. Patty Jenkins is back as the director. They went through negotiations, and she's happy with whatever those negotiations were. And she is set to direct Wonder Woman 2, which will start filming soon. News has it that the movie is going to be very different from its predecessor. So the first film is an origin piece. It takes place during World War I, so it's a period piece as well. And so the second film, I'm hoping, will take place in current day or post Justice League. We have heard in the past that the sequel could possibly take place during the Cold War in the 1980s. Which would mean that it's still not in the present, and it's still taking place before the events of Justice League. But I'm hoping that with everything that's gone down with Justice League, that Warner Brothers and DC are just going to want to move forward and not really be caught anywhere in the continuity or the timeline where we're still building towards the events of Justice League. It's like, let's just put that behind us, okay? Let's not look in the past. Let's get away from Justice League. Let's move towards a better, brighter future. So let's place this movie in current times. So personally, that's what I'm hoping for. And we'll just have to see what Wonder Woman 2 will do in that regards. It's still very early, and they're not going to leak out any information until later down the road. So what do I want to see in Wonder Woman 2, you might be asking? Maybe you're not asking, but I'm going to tell you. And then I'll ask you what you think and what you want to see. But what I'm hoping to see in Wonder Woman 2 is, Diana Prince works at the Louvre, or the Louvre Museum in Paris. So being in that setting, which makes perfect sense for her character, honestly. Uh, Being in that setting, that puts her in a position to eventually cross paths, if she hasn't already crossed paths, with Barbara Minerva, who is an archaeologist and who is well known as the alternate identity for the cheetah. And the cheetah is one of Wonder Woman's most prominent foes, and it just makes sense that, we've gotten Dr. Poison, we've gotten Ares in the first film, so it would be great to see Cheetah put on the map in the second film. And I often have a tendency to use Superman or Batman as a sort of barometer for other characters. So to me, Cheetah uh, does take a position of being like Wonder Woman's Lex Luthor. I do consider Ares to be one of her top foes, if not arch nemesis, but Cheetah seems to share that role for me. So, especially with growing up with Super Friends, and you had the Justice League versus the Legion of Doom, and Wonder Woman would often be squared off with Cheetah. So I just grew up with that concept, and that's just what sticks in my head. And I really hope to see her in Wonder Woman 2. Um, what would also make sense for Wonder Woman 2 is to perhaps have uh, Ares, Hades, or Circe, or a mix of the three of them, um, be the one who's uh, causing the events of the film to unfold, possibly leading to Barbara and Minerva's transformation into the cheetah. She's an archaeologist. She's out in the field. She starts off being very good friends with Wonder Woman, or with Diana Prince, and because of the events of the film, she becomes the cheetah, who is a, a ravenous arch nemesis of Wonder Woman. So it puts her in an awkward position. It puts both characters in an awkward position. They start off as friends, they end up being bitter enemies, and that's all being manipulated behind the scenes by either Ares, Circe, or Hades. And I bring up Hades because I would also like to see Steve Trevor be brought back into the series. I felt like him dying off the way he did was just like, it was a punch in the gut. And the chemistry between Steve Trevor and Diana in the first film is really something that made the movie for me. So to find a way to bring him back and see that chemistry again on screen, it's such a charming relationship to see unfold, and I think we got cheated out of it before it could even get too far along. And if Superman can have his Lois Lane, I think Wonder Woman can have her Steve Trevor, and it would make sense to make that be a part of the plot. So the story could revolve around uh, Wonder Woman discovering that Steve is being held prisoner by Hades, and she launches on a journey to rescue him from Hades, and that spins in machinations either on the part of Circe or Ares, who wants revenge, to thwart Diana's mission, and actually ends up turning Cheetah into, or turning Barbara Minerva into Cheetah to stop her from completing her mission. And uh, I don't know what Patty Jenkins is doing, but I would like to see something like that on screen. You let me know what you think, as far as what you want to see in Wonder Woman 2. The sky's the limit. There's a lot of things that could happen there. But in related news, I was talking about who's running DC Films right now. And so the news has come out from Variety that Walter Hamada is now the president of DC Films. He'll be working very closely with Jeff Johns, who is currently the DC Chief Creative Officer. So Jeff Johns' role spans across the television series, the animated films, the comic book industry, or the comic books, and the films as well. And hopefully, Jeff Johns and Walter Hamada will be working very closely together to kind of replicate the success that Kevin Feige has had over at Marvel Disney. That has been very sorely lacking at Warner Brothers DC. They need someone, a central figure, who's going to take this cinematic universe and be the focal point and be the creative point from which all of these films are being directed and forged. Right now, up to this point, it's been kind of aimless. There hasn't really been a focus on what will work for the audiences. What will the audiences want to see? And DC Warner Brothers has been dragging their feet on, oh, well, yeah, these films are a little bit too dark and brooding. Most audiences reject them. There are fans of the dark, gritty, brooding DC films, but there just aren't enough fans of these versions of the characters. So, as you've seen with Wonder Woman, there's been a shift away from that dark and brooding take that the Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman have taken. We have started seeing that shift in Justice League, but it was a little too late. And there's still that dark, gritty, Zack Snyder flavor in there. Justice League was going in the right direction, but it just was a little too late. And we're still looking at Wonder Woman as the model that the rest of the DC films need to follow. So Walter Hamada is coming over from New Line Cinema, and he worked as producer on films like the new It and all the films in the Conjuring universe. So that's quite promising because those films are all high caliber horror films that have all been very successful. And we're looking forward to seeing more films in the Conjuring universe. And I know that I personally can't wait to see the It sequel. So that's very promising to see that kind of roster from Walter Hamada as a producer. And I'm hoping he can reflect that type of success and strong storytelling and filmmaking with the DC universe. So in 2018, we'll be getting Aquaman. That's the only DC film that will be coming out this year. But in 2019, we'll be getting Shazam and Wonder Woman 2. Flashpoint, which is rumored to be the Flash film. Flashpoint is actually a storyline that was told in the comics that dealt with the Flash going back in time and saving his mother, who originally died, and changing the timeline, and then having to deal with the struggle of, do I let my mother die just to save the timeline that I'm originally from, or do I let this timeline go, which is actually a worse dystopia than the reality that the Flash originally came from. So the Flashpoint for many is being viewed as an opportunity to soft reboot the DC universe. This is the point where we will see that, oh, that's why the films are different. That's why these stories are different. It's because of Flashpoint that things are not as dark and brooding and the characters are more bright, etc., etc. A lot of people are conjecturing that Flashpoint will be the storyline that does that for the DC cinematic universe. We'll see. It's all up in the air. It's still, I believe, in pre-development because that film is off in 2020. So, and along with Flash or Flashpoint in 2020, there are loose plans to do the Green Lantern Corps, which that's been pushed off for a while, but we have already seen teasings of the Green Lanterns in the DC cinematic universe. We saw that in the Justice League film, and so it'll be exciting to see how they handle Green Lantern or the Green Lantern Corps in this iteration of the DC cinematic universe. We got that Ryan Reynolds movie. A lot of people are trying their damnedest to forget it, and we'll just have to see what they do with it. It's reported to be a buddy cop type of Lethal Weapon type of film. Reportedly, we're going to have Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan being partnered up in that film. So we'll see how that unfolds. I think that's a very smart approach to that. And hopefully they take cues from Guardians of the Galaxy and make Green Lantern the more cosmic aspect of the DC cinematic universe. You can leave everybody else grounded, and you know, Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart are the Green Lanterns of Earth, so they can come and play on Earth a little bit, but it should be a more cosmic type of story. So we'll see how they handle that. But that's slated for 2020. And then we have the Matt Reeves Batman movie, or Matt Reeves is reportedly doing a Batman trilogy. You know, you have to start somewhere though, so the first film has to do good. So there's no date for that yet because there's been all sorts of production hiccups with that. Henry Cavill has gone on record as saying that they are going to be working on Man of Steel 2, but there hasn't been any news of what is going to be happening with that film. We don't know when it's coming out. There's no release date. We don't know who's going to be in it. But my hopes are that they are finally going to get off their asses and put Brainiac in the starring role, or the starring antagonistic role, the starring villain, because he's been robbed of that opportunity since the 80s. He was supposed to be in Superman 3. He was supposed to be in the sequel to Superman Returns. He was supposed to be in Superman Lives, the movie that Tim Burton was going to be working on with Nicolas Cage, which thank God that didn't happen. So Brainiac's always been on the tip of the tongue, but he's never had the opportunity to actually be in a film and be the main villain. So I'm hoping that Man of Steel 2 is the final remedy to that, and we finally get to see a post-Justice League Superman. Henry Cavill was the closest to what a lot of people wanted to see in Superman since Man of Steel. So I have high hopes for Man of Steel 2, but there is no release date for that yet. So my hope for Walter Hamada and Jeff Johns is that they make this DC cinematic universe a tight ship. They get away from that dark, brooding stuff. You know, leave that for Batman. Batman can be dark and brooding all he wants. He's a dark and brooding guy. But all of these other characters, Superman is uh, the opposite side of the coin when it comes to Batman. There needs to be that contrast there. And we haven't had that because of this edict that everybody in DC needs to be dark and brooding, which obviously was wrong and it obviously doesn't work. So, just stick with the characters the way they should be, or the way the audiences are familiar with them. Make them fun, make them realistic, tell good stories, and just press forward and not get caught up in all of the convoluted machinations that they try to throw in these movies. So that is story number one. Let me know your thoughts on Wonder Woman 2 and on the developments that are happening at DC Films. Story number two. We're going to talk about Star Wars Episode 9. So, Episode 8 turned out to be, in some circles, it is being termed as a very divisive movie. A very divisive movie amongst the fans. So, and we've been hearing that a lot with a lot of these big tentpole type blockbusters. Transformers has had a bit of that. You have the new Transformers fans versus the old Transformers fans. They always tend to be divided, but all the Transformers movies do very well at the box office. Although the later ones have taken a bit of a dip, which has caused Paramount and Hasbro to look at things and reconsider the Michael Bay verse approach. We see that with the DC films. So the Man of Steel was a very divisive movie. Some people loved it, some people hated it. The same thing with Batman versus Superman. The same thing with Justice League. You have all these protests right now from people who want to see the Zack Snyder cut of the film versus the theatrical cut, which was redone by Joss Whedon. Some people don't care for the Zack Snyder style. Some people want more. So it's a very divisive stance that the fan community has taken on the current state of the DC films. So now we have the same situation happening with Star Wars. There are some people who went and saw Star Wars Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Some people went and saw it and they absolutely loved it. Other people absolutely feel that it ruined their childhood, that this was the worst Star Wars film ever. So you're hearing both sides of the spectrum. You're hearing it's the best Star Wars movie ever, or that it's the worst Star Wars movie ever. Star Wars is dead. So it's, which camp do you fall in? It's a strange stance that the fan community has taken. So that puts Disney in an interesting situation because Episode 8, The Last Jedi, has been out for 3 weeks at this point, going on 4, and it has hit $1 billion. It is now in the $1 billion club, and it only took 3 weeks to do that. Some movies have to be in the theaters for a while, at the box office for a few weeks before it can hit $1 billion. But by the end of its first week, Star Wars Episode 8 was already halfway there. So now you have a situation where, okay, it hit $1 billion. It's at in its third week, it's at $1 billion. And it's got a ways to go before it drops out of the theater. So the question is, will it hit $2 billion? And if it hits $2 billion, it'll be closer to being just as successful as its predecessor, Force Awakens. So if it's going to be that successful, do all the naysayers have anything to say? Is there any validity to what the naysayers are saying? Does J.J. Abrams have to come in and change his approach to episode 9? Because a lot of people are not liking the approach that Rian Johnson has taken. But The Last Jedi hit 1 billion and is probably going to come close to hitting 2 billion. And with The Force Awakens being the first Star Wars film in 10 years, there is this expectation that it's going to have a high turnout, and that with the sequel, episode 8, the turnout's not going to be as high. So, okay, Force Awakens performed better at the box office than The Last Jedi, but that's almost to be expected. There's going to be some drop off with the sequel because it's only been 2 years. So there's going to be some drop off. It's not like people have been waiting for a decade to see this movie. So we don't know where Disney stands. We don't know where Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, we don't know where they stand on what the state of Star Wars is and what it means that there are so many fans who are not happy with The Last Jedi. There are fans who weren't happy with Force Awakens. So Rian Johnson has done his part and he's moved on. Reportedly, he's working on a whole new Star Wars trilogy that falls outside of the Skywalker saga films. It's a whole anthology trilogy. So if there's news that comes out that he's been removed from that trilogy, or that trilogy is not going to be happening, that could be a sign that, oh, well, we're not going to go forward with Rian Johnson's vision. Maybe that will be a sign that there was a faltering because of what happened with The Last Jedi. So that'll be an indicator. And what J.J. Abrams does with episode 9 will potentially be an indicator for that as well, because Rian Johnson reportedly did not have an outline for the direction of this trilogy. There's no direction. There's no major beat points for the trilogy. Like, where does this trilogy start? Where does this trilogy end? There is no structure for that. So Rian Johnson comes in, and aside from being handed a script from Force Awakens, he really has no outline for what episode 7 is, what episode 8 needs to do, and what episode 9 needs to do. There's no outline for it. And so he proceeds to write his script based off of whatever he gleaned from the script from Force Awakens. But if you don't know anything about movie production, it's not like I'm a huge expert. But I do know that typically when you turn in that screenplay, the end product, the film that is produced, most often is going to be very different from that screenplay. You can do a lot to try to lock down and make that film as close to the screenplay as possible, but inevitably there are going to be differences when you're filming versus what's on paper. Sometimes you write down something and now you've got the actors and you've got all the performers and the crew, and you're not going to be able to shoot what was written. And so some things have to change. There's a lot of times there's ad-libbing. A lot of times, the director's looking at the script and, he or she feels like, this isn't going to work here, or this character isn't going to be like that. So oftentimes, very often, most of the time, the script that you get is going to be very different from what the end product is. You've probably heard about reshoots, and reshoots is a very common thing because maybe you did go in and you did everything to make sure that the script was reflected. But now that you have a finished piece and you're showing it off to the studio suits, maybe there's something that they don't like on screen, or you're showing it to test audiences, and test audiences aren't reacting well to what they're seeing on screen. But it was in the script. But now that you have this reaction, and now that you have this order that you have to change something, you have to go back and do reshoots, which goes further away from the script. So the script is just a blueprint, and the end product often does not look like the script. So here we are. Rian Johnson is handed a script, and we do know that the script for Force Awakens is not the final product. The issue with that is that Rian Johnson's writing a story based on something that doesn't exist. The final film is different from the script. So, but Rian Johnson's script is based on the script that doesn't exist in the movie. So there's going to be some discrepancies. There's going to be some issues. Perhaps Rian Johnson was in this situation where he wasn't sure. So, okay, he threw out some things because he just wasn't sure it was going to be where it needed to be by the time the film The Force Awakens was done. He killed off Snoke. He did some radical things, and that upset a lot of viewers. And for better or for worse, he rocked the Star Wars community. And we'll just have to see what J.J. Abrams does with 9. Now, what I'd like to see in 9, and you tell me what you would like to see, but what we're left with at the end of episode 8 is Kylo Ren is the supreme leader. Rey has the building blocks for the next chapter of the Jedi. The First Order reigns supreme, and the Resistance survives to rebel. There are potential Jedi students out there. The movie shows us this. And, that's pretty much it. So it's hard to see how 9 will bring closure. But because episode 8 picked up days or hours after episode 7, I'm thinking that a large time lapse needs to happen. So anywhere between 3 to 8 years needs to happen between 8 and 9. And this allows for both factions, the First Order and the Resistance, to evolve into whatever states they're going to be in by the beginning of 9. And it allows for the characters to grow. So, Rey probably at this point has established, she has Jedi students now. She has Jedi cohorts. It allows for potentially Kylo to have a secret offspring with one of his female Knights of Ren. And so the story could flux on that. The Knights of Ren are trying to hunt down Rey, who is recruiting Jedi students. The Resistance is continually building up and attacking the First Order. And so that by the end of episode 9, the First Order might still be intact. The First Order might still be reigning supreme, but Kylo Ren is dead. Rey spirits off with the uh, the children, Kylo Ren's secret offspring, thus ensuring that we will have a continued Skywalker saga. And the Resistance strikes a blow against the First Order. So the sequel trilogy could end similar to how the prequel trilogy ended, where the Empire reigns supreme, but there's still hope. And so that's what's all cyclical about Star Wars. So you get that cycle that Star Wars is very known for, that rhythm, that rhyme that George Lucas often talks about. And the Skywalker saga can continue. The only thing I don't want to see is another Death Star superweapon. Please, no more Death Stars or boom cannons or whatever the hell. We have to find a way. This is a challenge for J.J. Abrams. You have to find a way to do these films and not get caught up in these freaking super doomsday weapons. You got to find a way to leave them out. But we can have saga movies, Skywalker saga movies. I think that's a sub-brand of Star Wars. So to kill off the Skywalker line is like killing off one of your major product brands. You can have your anthology films. You can do a crap ton of anthology films, and you can put a break in there before you do 10, 11, and 12. Maybe we don't see that. Maybe we don't see 10, 11, and 12 for 10 years or 5 years. But I don't think they should totally kill off the Skywalker lineage, the Skywalker line. I think that's a sub-brand of Star Wars, and it needs to be maintained. I think you're going to be losing out on a lot of fans who are invested in the Skywalker line, whether they know it or not. And so that is story number 2. You let me know what you want to see in episode 9. Let me know your thoughts on what's happening in episode 9. I just think that the conversation in the community, the fan community, needs to shift from all of this, I hate Star Wars, I love Star Wars, I hate hearing people hate Star Wars. Let's just shift to the future. Okay, we don't like episode 8. Okay. You love episode 8. Okay. But, okay, we've heard that. So now what? Let's talk about something else. Let's move on to, what do we want to see in 9? What do we want to see in other Star Wars movies? I mean, there's other conversations that we can have where the fan community isn't so divided. All right, so that's story number 2. Story number 3 is Netflix. We're talking about sequel series and sequel films that are being released from Netflix. Netflix is clearly doing very well. There's no question about that. A lot of awesome, high caliber, high quality original series and films coming out from Netflix. And so the good news for fans of Marvel is that the Marvel series are pressing forward on Netflix despite the questions of Disney launching its own streaming platform, which is rumored to be Hulu, getting revamped. Disney's launching its own streaming platform sometime within the next couple of years here. And so at that point, Disney will be stripping anything that's Disney. And if the Fox merger goes through 100%, any Disney licenses and Fox licenses will be stripped off of Netflix, which will strike a great blow to Netflix. But in the meantime, we're getting a Daredevil season 3, which will feature Kingpin's return. And so I have high hopes for Daredevil season 3, and that's premiering later in 2018. Iron Fist is getting a season 2. which will probably air in late 2018 or around March 2019. I'm hoping the creative folks behind Iron Fist have found a way to make that titular character more likable. He's been annoying. Season one was a chore to get through because that character, you just wanted to wrap him in the mouth. And the same thing holds true for Defenders. He was the weak point in Defenders. And, I'm going to give Iron Fist season 2 a chance because, there's some elements of it that are interesting. The mystical aspect of it is interesting. The way it ties in with Daredevil and Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. I love those characters and I love this universe that they're building. So you almost have to be invested in Iron Fist, no matter if it's the redheaded stepchild that you just don't want to like. But I'm hoping season 2, they figure out a way to make him likable, and they've listened to the critiques, and they find a way to get rid of the issues that we've had with season 1 in Defenders. Jessica Jones season 2 airs on March 8th of this year. So we've got a couple of months before that show comes to us. And there is a trailer out there if you want to take a gander at it. We're also getting a season 2 of Luke Cage, which should be airing sometime perhaps mid-year in 2018. Filming has finished, so they have to do their post-production. And so I'm thinking we're going to get Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Daredevil, and then Iron Fist. That's probably the order they're going to fall in. Giving a few months in between each so you can, be saturated and get caught up in the one show before the other show rolls out. And on top of those Marvel series coming out, it's just great news to see all 4 of those series coming back. I'm very excited for seeing them in the year. I did finish Punisher recently, and that show actually was pretty good. So I'm hoping that Punisher will be getting a season 2. I haven't seen any news on that yet. If you have, let me know. But on top of those Netflix shows, we're also getting a sequel to Bright, which is a Will Smith blockbuster that skipped the box office and went straight to Netflix. So, Netflix is really gunning for the box office in this sense. I really liked Bright. It's the first Will Smith movie in a very long time that I've enjoyed. And I'm very happy to see a sequel to that. And I'm really hoping that they expand on what they've established in the first movie. Because there were some Easter eggs. I just heard that there was a centaur in Bright that I totally missed. So I'm going to have to go back, watch that movie, and look for the centaur. So I'm really looking forward to seeing them expand that universe, and we'll see what happens there. But I'm hoping that Netflix can pull off more of these blockbuster level films that skip the box office and go straight to Netflix's streaming platform. They're going to have to poise themselves to be a force to reckon with, because Disney is poising itself to potentially wipe Netflix out. So, we'll see how all of that develops. And those are all the stories I have for today. That was pretty lengthy. I hope you can make it through this episode. And let me know in the comments any topics that you want to have me research and discuss. Any concerns or questions you have about any of the stories that I've had, or any topics you want me to review. So that is it for episode 2 of Mike Jenkins Reviews. Until next time, have a good day.